My father's name flashes on my phone for the 5th time in a row. I watch it vibrate against my sleek glass desk, a surface worlds apart from the scratched oak table where I used to do homework as a child. Outside, the Chicago skyline glints under the afternoon sun, 5 stories below and 800 miles away from the ranch-style house I once called home. I hover my finger over the ignore button again. The leather chair creaks as I shift my weight. 3 seconds after the call ends, a new email arrives from Lawrence Reynolds. Subject: Your sister needs you. Last chance. My stomach tightens. I open the message and my eyes skim over the text, barely registering the words. Except the final line. Chloe's wedding is the most important event of her life. Be there or forget about any future support. A voicemail notification pops up next. I press play and set it on speaker. Maiden, it's your father. I don't know what game you're playing, but this has gone on long enough. Your sister's wedding is in 2 weeks. Festivities start this weekend. If you can't put aside whatever grievance you have for Chloe's special time, then you can forget about any future support from this family. Your mother is beside herself. Call me back immediately. A bitter laugh escapes my throat. I cross the room to my closet and pull out a frame hidden behind a row of winter coats. My diploma. The gold embossing still gleams. Maiden Ann Reynolds. Bachelor of Science in Data Science. Summa cum laude. 3 years it's been sitting here, collecting dust instead of hanging on the wall. Because old habits die hard. Because for so long I was taught to shrink myself, to be quiet, to not outshine the golden child. My phone buzzes again. This time, a text from my mother. Please call, your father is getting impatient. I glance at the desk calendar. Chloe's 2-week wedding extravaganza is circled in angry red. 14 days of ceremonies, photo shoots, family gatherings, and one too many forced smiles. I tap open my banking app. Savings, $138,139.27. More than enough to live on. More than enough to know I'll never need their support again. They just don't know it yet. A memory surfaces. 3rd grade. I'd come home clutching a report card with 5 perfect A's. Mom didn't even look up from her magazine. That's nice, honey. That same evening, the living room erupted in applause for Chloe's participation ribbon from a school play. She was the best one up there, Dad had beamed as I sat invisible on the stairs. It's always been this way. But not anymore. I walk back to my desk, run my fingers over my name on the diploma, and whisper to no one. It's time they finally see me. My laptop glows as I book a first-class ticket home. Not for them. For me. The rental car crunches over familiar gravel as I pull into the driveway. My childhood home looks like something from a bridal magazine now. White roses everywhere, ivory fabric wrapped around the porch railings, and a custom welcome sign that reads, Chloe and Elliot, a forever love. The front door swings open before I even reach the steps. Maiden, finally, my mother says, pulling me into a hug that's more obligation than affection. Decided to support your sister after all? Before I can answer, she's already directing me inside, her tone brisk. The house smells like vanilla candles and fresh paint. Every surface is covered with ribbons, gift bags, or seating charts. It's not a home, it's a set for Chloe's big performance. My father steps out from his study, reading glasses perched on his nose. He doesn't greet me with warmth, just a nod and a clipboard. Good, you're here. Programs need folding, gift bags need stuffing. Chloe needs these done by 4. I just walked in the door, Dad. And now you have something useful to do. Before I can argue, a shrill voice cuts through the air. No, I said cascading arrangements, not gathered. Chloe descends the staircase, her phone pressed to her ear. Her hair is perfectly styled, her manicure flawless. She sees me and holds up one finger, the universal sign for wait. This is literally ruining everything, she groans into the phone. Fix it. I don't care how. Then she turns to me, plastering on a dramatic sigh. Thank God you're here. The caterer's threatening to walk and Mom is useless with the seating chart. Nice to see you too, Chloe. Elliot's planning a surprise for the reception. I need to make sure it matches everything else. It's all got to be perfect. She doesn't ask how I've been or what I've been doing these past few years. No one does. Elliot? I ask, setting down my bag. Per fiancé, my mother supplies. You'll meet him at dinner. He's absolutely wonderful, a brilliant investor. Crypto-millionaire, Chloe corrects proudly. Dinner arrives with him, right on schedule. Elliot Brady, tall, sharply dressed, confident, the kind of man who looks like he belongs in an ad for luxury watches. So the mysterious sister finally shows up, he says, gripping my hand a little too firmly. Chloe says you're some kind of computer genius hiding in the big city. I'm a product analyst, I reply, neutral. Sounds intense, he winks. I've got friends developing an AI trading platform. Revolutionary stuff. We should talk shop sometime. During dinner, Elliot dominates the conversation. Crypto this, investment that, exclusive opportunities only available through his network. My father listens, enthralled. So, which exchanges do you use? I ask casually. Elliot's smile freezes for half a second. Oh, a mix, mostly private platforms, exclusive access through my team. And your company's based where? We're decentralized, the beauty of blockchain. My mother shifts uncomfortably. My father shoots me a warning look. Maiden, not everyone wants to talk business over dinner. As I'm not here for dinner. I'm here because something doesn't add up. And I've spent my whole life watching from the sidelines. Not this time. Later that night, while everyone else fusses over floral placements and signature cocktail names, I slip into my father's study under the pretense of searching for wedding programs. The room is dim and quiet, its mahogany shelves still lined with the same outdated business books from my childhood. What catches my eye, however, is a folder sitting half-hidden beneath a stack of catalogs. I slide it out. Refinancing paperwork. The property I grew up in almost entirely paid off for years, now burdened with a fresh mortgage, dated just 3 weeks ago. I flip through the pages, the numbers sharp and unforgiving. $15,000, 0 cents withdrawn, investment capital written in scrawled ink, co-signed by my father. My pulse picks up. The same man who once argued with me over a $75 0 cents calculator for school has now taken out a second mortgage on the family home. For Elliot. Voices float in from the dining room. Lawrence, are you sure about this second mortgage? My mother's voice wavers. That's everything for my inheritance too, she adds softly. Elliot has guaranteed 20% returns. Minimum, my father replies, too quickly. You wouldn't understand. Investments like these, this is how real wealth is built. I lean back against the wall, my mind already piecing together the risk variables, the promises, the vagueness, the overconfidence. It's textbook fraud, the kind I warn clients about at work. And now it's sitting in my parents' home, wearing a designer blazer and sipping red wine. The next morning, I find myself outside with Aunt Helen, pretending to admire the flower arrangements in the garden. You see it too, don't you? I ask quietly. She doesn't look at me, but her voice is low and steady. Mr. Wilson down the street lost $30,000 0 cents to an exclusive investment opportunity last year. Sounded awfully familiar when I heard Elliot talk. I nod. He's charming, convincing, too polished. His story doesn't track. He won't listen to me, she says of my father. Started saying I've always been jealous of his success. The words sting, but I'm not surprised. It's easier to believe in Elliot's dream than admit the truth about who he really is. Later that afternoon, I stop by Rosie's coffee shop, my old refuge during high school. The same vinyl booth, the same chipped counter, the same waitress, Margie. She eyes my laptop screen as she refills my coffee. That him? she asks, nodding to a photo on my screen. You know him? Called himself Edward something when he was with my cousin. Took $60, 0 cents K, and her engagement ring. Disappeared a week before the wedding. My fingers hover over the keyboard. Edward Lambert. One of 3 aliases I've already found. Ethan Lewis, Elliot Lawson, and now Elliot Brady. Same face. Same promises. Same vanishing act just before the vows. 2 hours later, across from me sits Karen, one of his former fiancées. Her hands tremble as she flips through a folder of photographs and police reports. I thought I was special, she whispers. He made me feel chosen. Her voice cracks. He disappeared 3 days before our wedding, took everything. Bank transfers to offshore accounts, stolen heirlooms, multiple victims. I take the folder and close it gently. The wedding is in 5 days, and my sister is about to become his next story. I won't let it happen. That night, I barely sleep. The hotel bed feels like a stranger, the silence louder than ever. I stare at the ceiling, turning over every fact, every photo, every financial record I've uncovered. My analyst mind races through timelines, aliases, cross-referencing locations and dates. There's no doubt. Elliot Brady is a con artist, and Chloe is just 5 days away from becoming his next victim. By morning, my plan is set. I print everything, screenshots of Elliot's LinkedIn profile under different names, wire transfer receipts from Karen's case, police statements from 3 different states, and most importantly, a timeline connecting his disappearances to each wedding he abandoned. It's all there in black and white. I return to the house around noon, armed with facts and resolve. The front door creaks as I enter, but no one greets me. Just the sound of someone crying. I follow the noise to the dining room. Chloe sits hunched over the table, surrounded by discarded place cards and crumpled tissues. The calligrapher used the wrong font, she sobs. I specifically said romantic script, and this is clearly classic serif. It ruins everything. I hesitate at the door. This is the moment I could walk away, keep my evidence to myself, let things unfold the way they're destined to. Let her find out on her own. But I know what that would feel like. To learn too late. I step into the room. I can call the calligrapher, I offer gently. She looks up at me through smudged mascara. Dad already did. At least he supports me. Of course he does. In the living room that evening, I call for a family meeting. Everyone gathers slowly, my mother with folded arms, my father with a drink in hand, Chloe trailing behind, red-eyed but composed. Elliot, ever the charmer, brings a bottle of wine. What's this about? My father asks. I place the folder on the coffee table and open it. This is about Elliot, I say. Elliot raises an eyebrow, a polite smile on his face. I've done some digging, and I've found evidence that he's not who he says he is. Chloe rolls her eyes. Seriously? My mother sighs. Maiden, not this again. I keep my voice steady. Elliot Brady is an alias. He's also gone by Edward Lambert and Ethan Lewis. In all 3 cases, he posed as a wealthy investor, got engaged to women, convinced their families to invest money, then disappeared days before the wedding. I pass around copies of the reports, photographs, and victim statements. He's done this before, he's doing it again. Elliot laughs softly. This is clearly a misunderstanding. I have a common face. People mix me up all the time. Karen's photo side by side with Chloe's, same man, same smile. 3 women in 3 different states, all with the same story, I say. Chloe pushes the papers away. You've always hated that I'm happy. You can't stand that I found someone who loves me. This isn't about jealousy, I reply. It's about facts. Enough, my father barks. This is absurd. Do you think we're fools? No, I say quietly. I think you're desperate to believe in something, even when the truth is staring you in the face. Chloe's breathing is sharp, furious. You're just trying to ruin everything. Look at the mortgage, Dad, I add. You've invested your home, Mom's inheritance, everything. And he's planning to vanish. My mother looks down. Elliot steps forward, voice smooth. I understand. You're concerned for your family. But this is slander. And just like that, the walls come up again. They don't want the truth. They want the fantasy. Even if it costs them everything. Even if it costs her. I sit alone at the edge of the living room, watching the people I once called family process the truth they don't want to hear. My father paces near the fireplace, lips tight. My mother fidgets with a napkin in her lap. Chloe glares at me like I've just set fire to her dress. And Elliot, he remains perfectly calm, as if he's done this a dozen times before. "This is clearly an attack," Elliot says, with just the right amount of hurt in his voice. "I came into this family with nothing but love for Chloe." I stand up slowly. "You came into this family with a plan." My father rounds on me. "Enough, maiden. I won't let you ruin your sister's wedding with these wild accusations." I meet his stare unblinking. "Then maybe it's time I tell you who I really am." They fall silent. I never went to community college. I never lived at home after high school. I boarded a bus to Chicago with 2 suitcases and a full scholarship to the University of Chicago. I graduated at the top of my class. I've been working as a product analyst ever since. I pull out my company ID and place it on the coffee table. 6 figures. Full benefits. I've been living my life. Quietly. Successfully. While you all thought I was some dropout freeloading in the suburbs. My mother's mouth opens and closes. "That can't be true. Call my office. Look up my LinkedIn. I've been someone else entirely while you were too busy polishing Chloe's participation trophies." Chloe scoffs. "So what? You're bitter because I got the attention and now you want to humiliate me?" "No," I say. "I want to save you." "By ambushing my fiancé with ancient photos and stories from strangers?" "By showing you what he really is." Chloe throws the papers off the table. "I don't care. Even if it were true, he's changed. He loves me." "He loves your family's money," I say, voice low. "The second mortgage. The investments. The inheritance. He's not staying past Saturday." Chloe's face twists with rage and heartbreak. "You're just jealous." The word hits like a slap. Jealous. For years I tried to be seen. For years I waited for a sliver of the praise they gave her for just existing. But not anymore? I straighten my shoulders. "I'm not jealous, Chloe. I'm free." My father slams his hand on the mantel. "That's enough. You've said your piece. Now leave." Elliot places a hand on his shoulder, all concern and charm. "She's just confused, Lawrence. Let's not make this uglier than it has to be." His words are calculated, calm, and utterly false. I gather the papers into my folder and look one last time at the people I used to beg to love me. "When he disappears with everything you've given him," I say quietly, "remember that someone tried to stop it." And then I turn. The front door is heavier than I remember. At 17, I had to sneak out just to breathe. At 26, I walk out with my head high, dragging no lies behind me. They may never believe me. But I know who I am now. And I won't disappear. Not for them. Not for anyone. I spend the next morning at Rosie's again, sipping black coffee in the same corner booth where I once studied for my AP calculus exam. Outside the window, the same rusted stop sign, the same crack in the sidewalk. But everything feels different now because I am different. I scroll through my laptop, eyes fixed on an open tab, a fraud alert form. I hesitate, then click submit. My phone buzzes, a message from Aunt Helen. "He left. 2 days before the wedding. Chloe's inconsolable. Your dad won't talk. I close my eyes. He did it again. I warned them. And still he vanished with their money, their trust, and their pride. Just like he had with the women before Chloe. Just like I said he would. But unlike them, I didn't disappear. This time, I told the truth. This time, I stood in the storm and refused to flinch. 2 days later, I receive a second text from Chloe. "I'm sorry. 2 words, no punctuation, no excuses, but maybe a start?" I don't reply, not yet. Back in Chicago, I hang my diploma on the wall for the first time. Frame polished, centered, visible. I call it closure. I call it a reminder. I call it mine. Later, I write the final lines in a journal I haven't opened in years. Sometimes the ones who should have seen you never do. Sometimes being invisible teaches you how to become undeniable. Have you ever stood alone in a room full of people you once loved, speaking a truth no one wanted to hear? Have you ever been the only one to see the danger, and still chosen to speak, even when it cost you everything. If this story speaks to you, if you've ever walked away not because you wanted to, but because you had to, then this moment is yours too. Don't wait to be seen. See yourself first. If you've ever had to stand in the fire and speak your truth knowing no one would believe you, you're not alone. Maiden's story is for you. If this story moved you, please like, share, and comment below. Let's make sure no one who speaks the truth ever feels invisible again.
At 1 o'clock in the morning, my porch light flickered across the front yard of my small house in Riverton, Arizona. The night air was dry, still carrying the faint hum of motorcycles from kids racing down the highway. Then came the pounding on my door. It wasn't the kind of knock that asked politely. It was frantic, uneven, desperate. "Mom, please, open up." I froze. It was Lena, my daughter. I pulled open the deadbolt, and before I could take a breath, she collapsed into my arms. Her lip was split, her left eye swollen shut, her hands clutched her stomach as if to hold herself together. In that moment, my body chose instinct over thought. I carried her inside, laid her on the sofa, and covered her with the nearest blanket. Then I looked up at the corner of my hallway where my police uniform hung pressed and ready. I knew tonight I wasn't just a mother, I was also an officer, and both would be tested. I should tell you who we are before the rest of this story unfolds. My name is Patricia Calder, but most people in Riverton call me Pat. I have worked as a patrol sergeant in this desert town for over 2 decades. Riverton isn't big, but it's the kind of place where everyone thinks they know everyone else's business. Rumors travel faster than the monsoon winds. My daughter Lena is 26. She grew up chasing lizards in our backyard, singing along to every song on the radio, and promising me she would always find her way back home. Lately she had grown quieter, more withdrawn, but I convinced myself it was just the stress of adulthood. I wanted to believe she was fine. There's one more piece you should know. My father left us a piece of land outside town. He worked hard for it, and it now stands in Lena's name. That land would soon become the center of a storm we never expected. The sound of Lena's voice still echoed in my ears as I tried to steady her trembling body. Her face was pale, her breath shallow. I fetched a damp towel from the kitchen and gently pressed it against her split lip, whispering for her to stay calm. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my head. I knew this was more than a bruise or two. Something had been broken long before she collapsed on my porch. I reached for my phone and dialed the number to the emergency room. "Dr. Patel, it's Pat Calder. Get a bed ready. I'm bringing my daughter. My car was in the shop, so I called for a cab." While we waited, Lena's phone lit up on the coffee table, buzzing again and again. On the screen were missed calls and threatening messages from Eric, her husband. My blood boiled. One message read, "Don't open your mouth if you want to keep everything." I reached for the phone, but Lena snatched it back with shaking hands. "Mom, don't. Please. It will only make it worse." Her voice was ragged, soaked with fear. I wanted to push, to demand answers, but instead I just squeezed her hand. "I'm here, honey. You're safe now." Inside, I made a silent promise this night would not pass without a record. We were starting a paper trail he couldn't erase. When we arrived at Riverton General, the fluorescent lights of the emergency room cut through the night like a blade. Dr. Anika Patel, a woman I had worked with on countless late-night calls, met us at the door. Her eyes moved quickly from Lena's swollen face to the way she held her side. Without hesitation, she guided us to an exam room. Nurses helped Lena onto the bed. They checked her vitals, gently lifted her blouse, and gasped at the dark bruise spreading across her stomach. Dr. Patel ordered X-rays and a CT scan to rule out internal bleeding. She moved with calm precision, but I saw the concern in her eyes. As Lena was prepped, I quietly asked the charge nurse for a copy of every photo, every note that would go into her medical record. "I need documentation," I said softly. She nodded. This wasn't the first time she had seen a case like this. While machines hummed in the background, Lena squeezed my hand, whispering, "Don't let him find me." I leaned close, my voice steady. "He won't. Not while I'm breathing." Before sunrise, we had discharge papers, imaging results, and a folder of medical photographs sealed for evidence. It was not just treatment, it was testimony written in ink and images. I tucked the file under my arm and walked out of the hospital knowing this was only the beginning. Back at home, the first rays of sun stretched across the street. As I stepped onto the porch, I noticed my neighbor, Mrs. Dolores Park, sweeping her front walk. She paused when she saw me and hurried over, her face lined with worry. "Pat, I heard pounding and crying last night. Is everything all right?" I hesitated for a moment, then told her the truth in a low voice. It was Lena. Eric hurt her. She came here in the middle of the night. Dolores's jaw tightened, her broom clutched like a weapon. "That man has no shame," she muttered. Then her eyes lit with sudden purpose. "My porch camera records everything. Maybe it caught her arriving." Together we opened the app on her phone. There it was, 1:02 a.m., Lena knocking weakly at my door, her voice faint but desperate. Hearing those sobs again made my chest ache, but I also knew this was crucial. I asked Dolores to send me a copy. She pressed my hand. "Whatever you need, I'll testify." Back inside, I saved the footage onto an encrypted drive in a backup folder on my laptop. For the first time, I felt the scales tip. We had evidence outside my word, outside my daughter's fear. Proof had begun to take shape. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call from Caleb Morton, a clerk I had known for years at the county records office. His voice was tense. "Pat, your name and Lena's just showed up on a land transfer file. It didn't sit right with me, so I thought I should warn you." My stomach tightened. "What transfer?" Caleb sighed. "According to the paperwork, your daughter signed her piece of property over to a woman named Tara Quinn. But Pat, the signatures look wrong, and the notary on the stamp wasn't even on duty that day." I drove straight to his office. Caleb slid a folder across the desk. The shaky handwriting on the page didn't resemble Lena's. My own name was scribbled too, awkward and slanted. It was a forgery in plain sight. "This came in from Eric," Caleb whispered. "He told the staff you asked him to file it because you were busy." I clenched the folder until my knuckles whitened. My father had worked himself ragged to secure that land. It was Lena's inheritance, a piece of our family's story. Now Eric was trying to steal it with a pen. I asked Caleb for certified copies of every page. He nodded quickly but warned, "Be careful. Someone inside helped push this through." Walking out with the file under my arm, I knew we weren't just fighting bruises anymore. We were up against lies written in ink. The next morning I drove to Malloy's Trading Post, the pawn shop Eric ran on the edge of town. The place smelled of motor oil and stale cigarettes. Two of his buddies leaned against the counter, their eyes narrowing as I walked past. One smirked. "Well, if it isn't the mother-in-law." I ignored him and pushed through the office door. Eric was behind a battered desk, counting stacks of bills. He looked up with a mocking grin. "Sergeant Calder, you here to buy or to nag?" I set a folder on the desk and slid it across to him. Inside were the photos of Lena's injuries, the ER report, still frames from Dolores's camera, and the forged deed Caleb had given me. Each page was a nail in his coffin. Eric's grin faltered for just a second, then returned. "And what do you expect me to do with this? I've got better lawyers than you." I met his eyes, my voice steady. "I don't expect you to do anything. The court will handle it." He leaned forward, voice sharp. "That girl of yours needed discipline. Don't think your badge will always save you." The words made my blood boil, but I stayed still. I gathered the file, stood, and looked him squarely in the eye. "From now on, it's not your rules, it's the law." Then I walked out, leaving his anger echoing behind me. By the end of the week, the gossip mill in Riverton was churning at full speed. At the farmer's market, I caught whispers trailing behind me. "She's just a cop using her badge to get even with her son-in-law." At the diner, I overheard, "Lena probably made the whole thing up." You know how young wives are, each word stung like a thorn, but I kept walking head high. That night, when I returned home, I found an unmarked envelope shoved under my front door. Inside was a scrap of paper, scrawled in uneven handwriting, "Shut up or you'll lose your daughter." My hands trembled as I read it, but not from fear, from fury. I slipped the note into the evidence folder, knowing one day it would be read under oath. I called Captain Joel Ramirez, my superior at the station. "We need extra patrols near my neighbor Dolores Park's house. Lena is staying there, and I won't risk Eric's men sniffing around." His voice was firm but carried a hint of concern. "Pat, you're walking a dangerous line, but I'll cover you. Just keep everything documented." The rumors grew louder, but so did my determination. I realized the battle wasn't just against Eric, it was against the story he was spreading to bury the truth. I knew the case would stay weak unless someone from Eric's inner circle came forward. That person was Tara Quinn, the woman who had been parroting on his arm while Lena nursed bruises at home. I learned she often spent evenings at the Silver Spur, a dimly lit bar at the far end of Hidalgo Street. One Thursday night, I put on an old jacket and cap, slipped into a corner booth, and waited. Around 10, Tara walked in wearing a red dress, her lips painted dark, a drink in her hand. She looked confident, but her eyes carried the weight of someone in over her head. I slid an envelope across the table. Inside were copies of the forged deed with her name on it and public records of her debts. "Eric can't protect you," I said quietly. "But the truth might." She laughed at first, but her hand trembled as she flipped through the papers. The color drained from her face. "He promised me land, a new start. I see now he just used me." Leaning closer, I told her, "You have one chance to walk away clean. Testify. Tell the court what really happened." Tara hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I'll do it, but you have to promise I'll be safe." For the first time, I felt the tide begin to turn. Back at Marcus Hale's law office, we spread the evidence across a long oak table. Photos of Lina's bruises, the ER report with Dr. Patel's signature, Dolores's video clip, the threatening note, and now the forged deed with Tara's name. Piece by piece, it formed a wall Eric could not climb. Marcus spoke with the calm focus of a man who had built cases like this before. Exhibit A, medical records. Exhibit B, the video. Exhibit C, the texts and threats. Exhibit D, the fraudulent deed and notary inconsistencies. He tapped each file as if anchoring it to the table. I added copies of Tara's written statement, notarized that morning, promising to testify about Eric's pressure and false promises. Marcus looked at me and said, "This gives us leverage, but we need protection orders in place immediately." That same afternoon, Judge Keaton signed a temporary restraining order, barring Eric from contacting Lina or Tara. Captain Ramirez arranged safe lodging for both women, away from Eric's reach. For the first time in weeks, I slept without pacing the hallway. The case was no longer a scattered set of fears, it was a structured defense, a living shield of fact. Rumors could twist, but evidence stood firm. The courthouse was packed the morning of the hearing. Wooden benches groaned under the weight of neighbors, co-workers, and strangers curious to see what would unfold. The air buzzed with whispers until Judge Raymond Keaton entered and called the room to order. Marcus Hale rose first. "Your Honor, this case is not about rumor. It is about records, injuries, and evidence that speaks for itself." He began with the medical file. Dr. Patel took the stand, explaining Lina's contusions and why they could not have come from a simple fall. Her testimony was calm, clinical, and devastating. Next came the video. On the screen, Dolores's porch camera showed Lina at 1:02 a.m. knocking weakly, her voice breaking through the quiet street. Gasps echoed through the courtroom as people saw with their own eyes what words alone could not capture. Then Marcus presented the threatening text messages. Each message was authenticated by phone logs. The words glared from the projector, "Don't open your mouth if you want to keep everything." The forged deed followed. Clerk Caleb Morton testified to the inconsistencies, pointing out the notary stamp that did not match official logs. It was irrefutable proof that Eric had tried to steal the Calder family land. Finally, Tara Quinn stepped forward. Her voice shook, but she told the truth. "Eric promised me a share if I signed the papers. He said Lina would never fight back. But he lied to me, and he lied to her." Eric shot up from his chair, shouting, "You traitor." The judge's gavel slammed down. "Order." When it was my turn, I stood tall in my uniform. "I am a police officer, but today I am here as a mother. The man who hurt my daughter and forged our names is not a protector. He is an abuser, and the law must answer." Eric's lawyer, Victor Ames, tried to twist the narrative, suggesting extortion and bias, but each rebuttal fell against the hard surface of documented proof. By the time Marcus closed, the room was silent. The evidence had spoken louder than the gossip ever could. Everyone knew the truth. Judge Keaton returned after a long pause, his voice steady as he read the ruling. First, a protective order for Lina, guaranteeing Eric could not contact her under any circumstance. Second, the deed transfer to Tara Quinn was nullified, restoring the property to its rightful owner. Third, every one of Eric's assets was frozen pending investigation. Finally, the judge referred the case to the district attorney's office to pursue charges of domestic violence, fraud, and witness intimidation. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others whispered prayers under their breath. Eric slumped back in his chair, his face drained of color. His attorney shuffled papers, avoiding eye contact. Two deputies approached and snapped handcuffs around Eric's wrists. the sound of metal clicking shut rang through the room like a final verdict. As they led him out, I caught a glimpse of his eyes, once smug and unshaken, now clouded with panic. I reached for Lena's hand. She was trembling, but for the first time in weeks, she exhaled a breath that sounded like freedom. Justice had not erased her pain, but it had carved out a path toward safety. In the weeks that followed, life didn't simply return to normal. Healing rarely moves in straight lines. Lena often woke in the middle of the night, her body jolting upright from nightmares. Sometimes she cried out, convinced Eric was at the door. Each time I sat by her side, holding her hand until her breathing slowed. Dr. Naomi Winters, the therapist Marcus recommended, began meeting with Lena twice a week. Slowly, Lena learned grounding exercises, counting objects in the room, steadying her breath, writing down her fears instead of burying them. It wasn't magic, but it gave her tools to face the darkness. Small victories appeared like scattered sunlight. Lena walked to the store alone without scanning every doorway. She cooked dinner and hummed along to an old song she once loved. The first time I heard her laugh again, it caught me off guard and nearly brought me to tears. As for me, I carried this case into my daily patrols. Each time I met a woman afraid to speak, I shared resources, a phone number, or simply a listening ear. I wanted them to know silence feeds the pain, but truth, even slow, even heavy, can set a person free. If you are listening to this and parts of Lena's story feel familiar, I want you to know there are practical steps you can take. First, if you are in immediate danger, call emergency services. Your safety comes before everything else. Second, document what is happening. Take photos of injuries with a phone or camera that records date and time. Save threatening texts or voicemails and back them up to a cloud folder or an external drive. Small details can become powerful evidence later. Third, seek medical help. Ask for printed discharge summaries and make sure the records describe every injury. Hospitals often take photos that can be stored in your file. Ask for copies or reference numbers. Fourth, check public property records. If you suspect fraud, request certified copies of deeds and compare signatures. Notary logs can reveal inconsistencies that matter in court. Finally, reach out for support. Domestic violence hotlines, advocacy groups, and legal aid services exist in many communities. You don't have to go through this alone. Even if you feel isolated, there are people and systems ready to stand with you when you choose to speak. When I look back at that night, I don't see victory. I see a daughter who found the courage to knock on my door, and a mother who chose to fight with the tools of the law instead of anger. Putting on my uniform that morning wasn't about revenge. It was about keeping a promise that the law is meant to protect the vulnerable, even when the offender sits at your own family table. If this story resonated with you, share it. Leave a comment with the city you're watching from. Someone else might read your words and feel less alone. And remember, silence only serves those who harm. Speaking up, however hard, can open the door to safety and hope. My name is Hilda Thompson, and I am 60 years old. What I am about to tell you will forever change the way you see your own family. Just 3 days ago, I found myself standing at the edge of a cliff with my husband Robert. Our son Nathan and his wife Samantha had invited us on what they called a special anniversary hike. They said it would be a day filled with laughter, photos, and memories. Instead, it became the day our lives nearly ended. The air was crisp, the kind of clean mountain air that fills your lungs and makes you feel alive. The trail had been quiet, only the crunch of our shoes against gravel and the occasional bird overhead. I remember looking at Robert, his face red from the climb, and thinking that even after 40 years together, he still looked strong to me. I never imagined that strength would be tested in a way neither of us could have prepared for. We reached a high point where the valley stretched endlessly below us. Samantha pulled out her camera with a smile. She asked us to step closer to the edge so she could capture the view behind us. Robert hesitated, but Nathan reassured us with his familiar calm voice. He said it was perfectly safe, that he would stand right behind us in case we stumbled. For a brief second, I wanted to believe him. After all, he was my son. A mother does not easily let go of that trust, no matter how much doubt lingers. We moved back a step, then another. The rocks shifted slightly under my shoes. I gripped Robert's hand tighter. Samantha adjusted the camera. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were sharp, almost urgent. Then Nathan moved. It was sudden, forceful. I felt his hands push against my back, not gentle, not steadying, but deliberate. The ground disappeared beneath me. The world turned into sky and air and a terrible rushing sound. My stomach dropped as though the earth itself had vanished. I hit the rocks hard, pain exploding through my body. My vision blurred, my breath shallow. Somewhere beside me, Robert landed with a heavy crack. I wanted to cry out, to reach for him, but then I heard his whisper, ragged and full of urgency. "Hilda, do not move. Play dead." The words cut through the pain, through the chaos. I forced myself to be still, my eyes half open, my body limp. I became nothing but silence. Above us, I could hear Samantha's voice, high and trembling, calling out about an accident. Nathan's voice followed, rehearsed and careful, already shaping a story. In that moment, the truth was clear. Our son and his wife had just tried to kill us, and this was only the beginning. Before that terrible day on the mountain, my life was not extraordinary, but it was filled with the kind of simple joys many people take for granted. Robert and I had built a life together in a modest home on the edge of a quiet town. I taught at the local elementary school where every day brought me stories of curious children and their endless questions. Robert ran a small carpentry shop behind our house. His hands, rough from years of work, could turn the plainest piece of wood into something lasting and beautiful. We had 2 sons. Daniel, our firstborn, was the light of our lives. He had a laugh that filled the house, the kind of sound that made even the darkest days seem brighter. He was quick to help his father in the shop, quick to shield me from worry, and quick to dream of a future full of possibilities. Daniel wanted to study engineering, to build bridges and create things that would last far beyond his own lifetime. Nathan, our younger son, was different. Quieter, more reserved, a boy who seemed to live in his own world. He did not laugh as easily as Daniel, nor did he share his brother's excitement for the future. Still, as a mother, I loved him with the same intensity. I told myself that children blossom in their own time, that Nathan simply needed patience and space to find his way. On Sundays, after church, the 4 of us gathered around the oak dining table that Robert had crafted with his own hands. Daniel would share stories about his studies and plans, his voice brimming with energy, while Nathan picked at his food in silence. I often wished he would speak up, share more, but I convinced myself it was only his nature. Life was simple, and in its simplicity, beautiful. In the evenings, Robert and I walked the trail near our home, talking about the future. We imagined growing old together, watching grandchildren play in the yard, and traveling to see the ocean for the first time. I thought those walks were only a way to stay healthy, but in truth they were training for the hardest walk of my life, the one that nearly ended on the cliff. Looking back now, I see that even in our happiest moments, shadows were already forming. The year Daniel turned 20 was the year everything changed. Until then, our family life had been marked by ordinary routine: school, work, church, and quiet evenings together. But I began to notice small cracks forming, moments when Daniel and Nathan whispered harshly in the hallway only to fall silent when I walked in. Their arguments were never loud enough for me to catch the words, but their tense faces told me more than they realized. When I asked Robert, he brushed it off as brotherly disagreements, the kind that would pass with time. I wanted to believe him, because I needed to believe our family was still whole. One October evening, Daniel did not come home for dinner. At first, I thought he had stayed late with friends or been caught up in his studies. Hours passed. By midnight, my worry had turned into panic. Robert and some neighbors searched the town, the trails, every place Daniel might have gone. Nathan stayed in his room, claiming he was studying, though I remember the strange look in his eyes when I asked about his brother. It was a mix of fear and something colder. At dawn, the search ended with news that shattered me. Daniel's body was found at the bottom of a rocky gorge just outside town. The police said he must have stumbled in the dark and fallen. Their words washed over me like ice water. An accident, they said. A tragedy no one could have prevented. I clung to that explanation because the alternative, that something darker had happened, was too unbearable to imagine. Daniel's funeral was the darkest day of my life. I wore the same black dress I had worn to my mother's funeral, but this loss was heavier than any before. I sobbed until I could no longer stand, while Nathan sat silent, his expression unreadable. He did not cry, not even once. At the time, I told myself everyone grieves differently, that his quietness was his way of coping. But now, looking back, that silence chills me to my core. Robert never left my side that day, holding me up when my legs gave out, whispering words of comfort. I thought he shared my grief entirely. What I did not know was that he carried a secret heavier than my sorrow, a secret that would stay buried for 25 years. While I mourned one son, Robert silently protected the other. After Daniel's death, Nathan changed in ways that, at the time, I thought were signs of maturity. The boy who had once been so withdrawn suddenly became more attentive. He offered to help me with chores, carried groceries without being asked, and sat with Robert in the workshop as if learning the trade would bring him closer to his father. I saw it as a silver lining to our tragedy, a way for Nathan to fill the gaping void Daniel had left behind. I wanted to believe that losing his brother had awakened in him a sense of responsibility. When Nathan met Samantha, I thought my prayers had been answered. She was polite, warm, and quick to call me Mom. She helped in the kitchen during visits, laughed at Robert's corny jokes, and seemed to adore Nathan. Together, they built a small business in woodworking, following in Robert's footsteps. In time, they had 2 children, and I thought life was finally offering us a second chance at happiness. The sound of little feet running across the yard, the laughter of grandchildren, it all soothed the wound that Daniel's absence had carved into my heart. But not every mask reveals itself quickly. Looking back, I realize how carefully Nathan had constructed his. Every kind gesture, every act of attentiveness was part of a performance he had perfected. He wanted us to see a son who had grown into a devoted man, a father who worked hard, a husband who loved deeply. And for years I accepted the image he presented because it was easier than questioning it. The truth, however, was far darker. Beneath the surface, Nathan was not healed or transformed. He was calculating, hiding his guilt behind a veneer of responsibility. He had not become better after Daniel's death, he had simply become better at pretending. And though I could not see it then, the same son I believed had saved me from despair was quietly preparing to destroy me. 6 months ago, the mask Nathan had worn for decades began to slip. It started with casual suggestions, spoken over dinner or while sipping coffee in our kitchen. "Mom, Dad, you should think about getting your affairs in order," he said one evening, his tone gentle but insistent. Samantha, seated beside him, smiled sweetly and added, "We only want to make sure you're protected. It's important for families to plan ahead." At first I thought it was simply concern, but their interest quickly grew into pressure. Robert and I had worked our entire lives to build a modest nest egg. Between the house, a piece of land I had inherited from my parents, and the savings account we had carefully added to each month, we had managed to put away nearly $200,000. It wasn't a fortune, but to us it represented security, stability, and the ability to leave something behind for our grandchildren. To Nathan and Samantha, it seemed to represent opportunity. They insisted we visit a lawyer. "It'll give everyone peace of mind," Nathan said, his eyes steady on mine. He argued that we should name him and Samantha as our sole heirs. That way, he reasoned, we can make sure the grandchildren get their fair share when the time comes. Robert, ever the trusting father, nodded along. He believed Nathan was only looking out for us. But I felt something else in the way my son pressed the issue, a coldness in his insistence that unsettled me. In the weeks that followed, their visits grew more frequent, but the warmth that used to accompany them was gone. Instead of coming to share a meal or watch the children play, they came armed with suggestions about selling the house, buying life insurance policies, or granting Nathan power of attorney. "This place is too big for just the 2 of you," Samantha remarked one afternoon as she inspected the living room like a buyer considering a property. "It would be so much smarter to downsize while the market is strong." Her words, coated in politeness, carried a sharp edge. She was not suggesting, she was directing. Robert began to waver. Practical by nature, he considered the logic in their arguments. But I couldn't shake the sense that there was more behind their urgency. Each time Nathan spoke about the future, I caught a flicker in his eyes and impatience, almost as if he couldn't wait for us to hand everything over. That flicker haunted me. I had seen it once before, long ago, in the days leading up to Daniel's death. Back then, I ignored it. This time I couldn't. One night, after yet another tense conversation with Nathan and Samantha, as our will, Robert and I found ourselves arguing for the first time in years. He believed Nathan's concern was genuine, that we should at least consider his suggestions. I, however, felt something deeply wrong pulsing beneath the surface. As we washed dishes side by side, I asked softly, "Do you remember what Nathan was like before Daniel died? Doesn't it ever strike you as strange how quickly he changed?" Robert stopped mid-motion, a plate dripping water in his hands. For the first time I saw fear in his eyes. "Hilda," he said quietly, "there are things about Daniel's death I never told you." My heart pounded as if it would break my ribs. I set down the dishcloth, unable to breathe. "What do you mean?" I whispered. Robert's shoulders sagged under the weight of decades of silence. That night, I followed Nathan. I saw him with Daniel at the gorge. They were shouting, furious. Daniel had papers in his hand, bank statements. He had discovered that Nathan had been stealing money from our savings. Small amounts at first, but then more. He confronted him, demanded he confess to us. My legs trembled. I wanted to believe I had misheard. And then, Robert's voice cracked. Nathan snapped. He shouted that Daniel was always the favorite, that he always had everything. And then, Hilda, he shoved him. Robert's hands gripped the edge of the sink, knuckles white. I saw Daniel lose his balance, clawing at the air, and then he was gone. Just like that. His words felt like knives tearing through 25 years of memories. Why didn't you tell me? I demanded, tears streaming down my face. Robert's reply was heavy with guilt. Because when I reached Nathan, he was crying, trembling, saying it was an accident. He begged me not to tell you. I wanted to believe him. He was my son too, and Daniel was already gone. I staggered back, clutching the counter for support. Everything I thought I knew about my family had been a lie. My sweet Daniel had been murdered by his own brother, and I had spent 25 years loving that murderer, trusting him, letting him raise his own children under my roof. Robert's confession left me hollow, broken in ways I had never imagined. In that moment, I understood that Nathan's new obsession with our finances was not about care or responsibility. It was about finishing what he had started long ago, and this time he was coming for us. The very next evening, as if fate wanted to confirm Robert's confession, the phone rang. It was Nathan. His voice carried that same practiced warmth that once fooled me but now only filled me with dread. "Mom," he said cheerfully, "Samantha and I were talking. Next weekend is your 40th anniversary. We want to do something special for you and Dad. How about a trip to the mountains? A little hike, a picnic, some photos. It will be perfect." Robert, who was sitting across from me at the kitchen table, heard every word. His face went pale, and we exchanged a look heavy with unspoken fear. This was it. The invitation was not for a celebration. It was for our execution. My hand shook as I held the phone, but I forced my voice to sound steady. "That's very thoughtful, Nathan. Let us think about it and get back to you tomorrow." When I hung up, silence pressed down on us like a weight. Robert finally spoke, his voice low. "If we refuse, he will find another way. A fire, a car accident, something that will look even more natural. At least if we go, we know what to expect." His logic was terrifying, but it made sense. That night we planned. Robert decided to hide his phone in his jacket and set it to record the entire trip. If we survive, he said, we'll have evidence. If we don't, at least the truth won't die with us. I wrote a letter to my sister, explaining everything Robert had confessed about Daniel and warning her about Nathan. I hid it among our important documents, praying she would find it if we never came back. We went to bed holding each other tightly, whispering words of love that could have been our last. For the first time, I looked at the man I had shared my life with and realized we were no longer just husband and wife. We were survivors preparing for battle, against our own flesh and blood. Saturday arrived with a clear blue sky, the kind that would normally inspire peace. Instead, it felt like a cruel joke. Nathan pulled into our driveway, whistling as though it were just another family outing. Samantha followed close behind, carrying a bright smile and a backpack stuffed with supplies. She showed me the cookies and bottled water she had packed, and then lifted her new camera with pride. "I want to capture every moment," she said. Her words twisted in my stomach, for I knew the photos she planned to take would be of our deaths. The ride to the mountains was unbearably long. Samantha hummed along to cheerful songs on the radio while Nathan drove carefully, stopping at every sign, making sure not to draw attention. Robert slipped his hand into mine and discreetly tapped his phone, starting the recording. Every word, every sound would be preserved. I clung to that small comfort. The trail began gently, winding through tall trees. Samantha darted ahead, pointing out flowers and snapping pictures, playing the role of a joyful daughter-in-law. Nathan lingered behind us, his presence heavy on our backs. Each time I turned, he gave me a smile that never reached his eyes. "You doing okay, Mom? Dad?" His voice was syrupy sweet, but every syllable dripped with menace. After nearly an hour, the trail grew steeper. My legs ached, Robert's breathing grew ragged, and still Nathan pressed us forward. Finally, Samantha exclaimed, "Look at that cliff. The view will be incredible for pictures." My blood ran cold. This was it, the place they had chosen. The cliff towered above us, the rocks loose and jagged, the drop below unforgiving. It was the perfect place for a staged accident. We followed reluctantly, scrambling over shifting stones until we reached the top. The valley stretched out before us, breathtaking and terrible all at once. "Stand closer to the edge," Samantha instructed, raising her camera. Robert squeezed my hand, reminding me of the recording. I nodded and stepped back with him, the abyss yawning behind us. "Perfect," Nathan said, moving closer. His tone changed, darker now, no longer needing to pretend. Samantha's smile hardened. "Hug each other," she said. "And smile. This will be your last photo." In that instant, I knew the time had come. Robert and I stood at the edge, our son and his wife ready to end our lives, and all we could do was brace for the final push. The fall left us battered and bleeding. Rescue teams found us and worked with a precision that felt foreign after the chaos of the cliff. I remember the harsh smell of antiseptic, the way lights stung my eyes, and the constant beeping of machines. Paramedics moved quickly, checking vitals, securing us to stretchers. All the while, Nathan and Samantha circled the scene with the practiced grace of actors playing their parts, distraught, shocked, relieved that they had survived what everyone would call a terrible accident. At the emergency room, the staff separated patients and began triage. Robert and I were stabilized and prepped for transport to surgery. For hours, I lay very still, every breath a conscious effort. I kept my eyes mostly closed, listening for the voices around me. Nathan's had that same measured tone, soft, convincing, calculated. Samantha's sobs were loud and public, perfect for the witnesses who might later be called to testify on their behalf. It was a young nurse who changed everything. Her name was Lauren. She was new to night shifts but sharp-eyed and quietly determined. While she checked my IV and monitored my pulse, something about my response to pain made her pause. My breathing was shallow but not lifeless. My fingers twitched when she adjusted the blanket. She leaned closer and watched me, her brow furrowing as she considered the impossible, that I might be pretending. Lauren moved with the discretion of someone who has seen too much to make a spectacle. She whispered to a fellow nurse that something felt off and then approached me when the hall outside was clear. Using gestures she had learned in training, she asked me to squeeze her hand if I could hear her. I squeezed once, then twice. She froze, eyes widening. Quietly, she mouthed that she would get the doctor and the police. While Lauren staged her next move, Robert managed, through pain, to whisper that he had recorded parts of the trip. He had hidden his phone on his person and set it to capture everything. When the doctor arrived, Lauren told him what she had seen. The doctor listened, then approached Nathan and Samantha with a firmness that did not suit the sympathy they were performing in the waiting room. A hospital security officer and an on-call detective were called in. As technicians downloaded the recording from Robert's phone, the reality of what had happened on the mountain began to emerge in hard evidence, planning, rehearsed lines, the shove, the cold language Nathan used about removing obstacles. The staff watched Nathan and Samantha's faces as the first clips played shock, fury, then the rapid calculation of people realizing their camouflage had been pierced. In moments, the ER shifted from a place of triage to a scene of investigation. Lauren stood by us quietly watchful, and in her small, decisive actions she became the first ally in a life that had been reduced to a fight for truth. The fall was a blur of terror. I remember the scream caught in my throat, the rush of wind, and the sickening crack when my body struck the rocks. Pain exploded through me, so sharp and overwhelming that I thought my life had ended in that instant. Beside me, Robert groaned, his voice faint but alive. "Hilda," he whispered, "don't move. Play dead." Those words, spoken through his agony, were our only chance. I forced my body into stillness, every muscle screaming for release. My breaths were shallow, my eyes fixed, as I listened to Nathan and Samantha crawling nearby. They had survived the fall too, though by their groans they were badly injured. "Are they dead?" Samantha asked through clenched teeth. Nathan's voice came, ragged but sure. "Yes, both of them. Eyes open, no breathing. His lie was my salvation." Their conversation drifted over the rocks, cruel and casual. They rehearsed the story they would tell, how a loose stone had caused Robert to fall, how I had tumbled after him, and how they, our brave, grieving children, had barely survived. I lay motionless, tasting blood, listening to the two people I had loved plan their escape from justice. Hours passed like years. Then faint voices echoed from above, rescue workers. Nathan shouted for help with convincing desperation. Soon ropes and flashlights appeared, and rescuers descended. They checked Robert first. "Faint pulse," one said. "Then me. I can't tell if she's breathing. Good. Let them believe I hovered between life and death. It was safer that way." At the hospital, chaos surrounded us. Doctors and nurses swarmed, rushing us into emergency rooms. I kept my eyes closed, my breath shallow. If Nathan or Samantha suspected I lived, they would finish the job. A young nurse, her badge reading eyes, leaned close as she checked my vitals. When she thought no one was watching, she whispered, "If you're in danger, give me a sign." I managed the tiniest twitch of my finger. Her eyes widened in shock. She understood. Inez returned later with 2 police officers and the chief doctor. "You're safe now," the detective whispered. "If you can hear me, open your eyes." Slowly, painfully I did. Relief washed over the room. For the first time since the cliff, I believed we might live to tell the truth. The moment I opened my eyes, everything changed. Detective Johnson leaned forward, his voice steady but urgent. "Mrs. Black, we know you've been through hell, but we need you to tell us what really happened." My voice was weak, cracked, but clear enough. "My son and his wife pushed us. They tried to kill us." The detective's expression hardened. He motioned to the nurse, who nodded, confirming she had overheard Nathan's chilling whisper about Daniel. Robert, still pale and in pain, handed over his phone from the nightstand. "It's all here," he croaked. "Their voices, their plan. Proof. The recording captured everything: their lies about taking care of us, their cruel rehearsal of the accident, and even Melissa's bitter laugh when she thought we were dead." While police technicians reviewed the files, Nathan and Samantha sat in the waiting room downstairs, still playing the role of grieving children. They cried into tissues, spoke softly about funeral arrangements, and accepted condolences from strangers. They had no idea their performance was collapsing. "The evidence is airtight," the detective said an hour later. "We're moving now." Through the hospital window, I saw plainclothes officers quietly surround the building. Moments later, the announcement came over the radio: "Nathan Black and Samantha Black, you are under arrest for the murder of Daniel Black and the attempted murder of Robert and Hilda Black." Their reaction was immediate. Samantha shrieked, insisting she was innocent, blaming Nathan. Nathan shouted back, accusing her of being the mastermind. Their carefully crafted unity shattered in seconds. Every word of their frantic blame game was recorded, strengthening the case even further. Months later, the trial began. Walking into the courtroom, I felt both terrified and resolute. Nathan avoided my eyes, his face hardened into a mask I no longer recognized as my son's. Samantha dabbed her eyes with tissues, playing the victim. But when I stood in the witness box, I told the jury everything about Daniel's death, about the thefts, about the cliff. At the end of my testimony, I turned to Nathan. "My son died the night you killed your brother. What sat at my table for the past 25 years was a stranger." The silence in the courtroom was suffocating. The jury deliberated 3 days. When the verdict came guilty on all counts, I felt the weight of decades lift from my shoulders. Nathan and Samantha were sentenced to life in prison without parole. Justice had finally spoken. After the sentencing, Robert and I returned home to a house that felt both familiar and foreign. Every corner held memories, but also shadows of betrayal. The kitchen table where Nathan had once eaten his meals, the porch where Daniel had laughed about his college plans, the workshop filled with Robert's careful handiwork, all of it seemed frozen in time. Yet for the first time in decades, there were no lies lingering in the air, only truth, painful but freeing. Our greatest concern was the children, Nathan and Samantha's 2 young ones. They had been placed in temporary foster care while the legal storm unfolded. The thought of them growing up in strangers' homes, carrying the stigma of their parents' crimes, broke my heart. Robert and I made the decision that surprised even ourselves: we would apply for custody. Those children were innocent. They had lost enough already. The process wasn't easy. There were evaluations, home visits, and endless questions about whether 2 people in their 60s were capable of raising children again. But each time the children came to visit during the process, I saw their faces light up when they entered our home. They ran through the yard, chasing each other the way Daniel and Nathan once had. They curled up on the couch with Robert, listening to his stories. They helped me bake cookies in the same kitchen where I had once taught their father. In their laughter, I heard healing. The day custody was granted, I cried harder than I had in years. It wasn't joy exactly, it was something deeper, a mixture of relief, grief, and hope. We tucked them into bed that night, and I told them about their Uncle Daniel. I told them he was kind, honest, and brave. I wanted his memory to be the one that shaped their future, not the choices of their parents. Life will never be the same. The wounds are deep, and there are nights when I still wake up hearing Nathan's voice or Samantha's laugh, echoing like a curse. But each morning when I hear little feet running across the floorboards, I remember why Robert and I survived. We are here to give those children the life they deserve, a life built on love, honesty, and the lessons bought at such a terrible cost. Looking back, I sometimes wonder how I managed to survive it all: the lies, the betrayal, the cliff, and the truth about Daniel. For years, I believed we had built a perfect family, but perfection was only a mask hiding rot beneath the surface. When the mask finally broke, the truth almost destroyed us. Yet, from the ruins of that nightmare, something unexpected grew. Robert and I may carry scars, but we also carry purpose. We are raising 2 children who deserve to know that love is not manipulation, that family is not about control or greed, and that the truth, though painful, is always worth facing. The hardest lesson I've learned is this: sometimes the greatest danger comes not from strangers, but from those we trust most. And while it's heartbreaking, there is power in choosing to face the truth, even when it shatters everything you thought you knew. If you are listening to my story today, I hope you take this with you. Never ignore the small doubts in your heart. Pay attention to the shadows, to the things that do not feel right. And most of all, protect yourself and those you love with honesty, no matter how hard it may be. Robert and I have begun a new chapter, not free from pain, but full of hope. Each night, when I tuck my grandchildren into bed, I remember that the fight for truth and survival was not in vain. It gave them a chance at life, and that makes every scar worth it. If this story touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Your support means more than you know. Together we can remind the world that even in betrayal, resilience and love can still prevail.